Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Developers, where we bring together curious minds from business and tech. In this episode, we're joined by Scott Chacon, co-founder of GitHub and CEO of GitButler, Sead Ahmetovic, CEO and co-founder of WeAreDevelopers. And leading the conversation is none other than Saran, CEO of Disco, as they share their personal and professional journeys. Their coffee hangout was recorded at the This Next Thing conference in Pontresina, Switzerland, organised by our dear friends and the very best hosts around, Paul and Eamon. So get comfortable, grab your favourite brew, and let's dive into this one together.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have a little interview we're going to do today with Scott and Sead. Can we get a round of applause for them joining us on stage? Round of applause. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so I have a lot that I want to cover today. I'm very excited to talk about developer communities. First, I want to start from your origin stories. When did you all first get into coding?
When did I get into coding? That's a good question. Okay. This is a story I don't tell very much. When I first got into coding because I got a TI-82 calculator.
Nice.
When I was in math class in high school. And I learned that you could program it. And I didn't like, so I made a Lemmings game where the little lemmings would go and kind of kill themselves. And then I made a Monopoly game, like a full-fledged Monopoly game. And then what happened was that the teacher learned that students could program things into the calculators, and so they'd go through and they'd wipe the memory of the calculators every time, and you couldn't really offload it anywhere.
That's
and so
mean.
Then I wrote a program that would emulate the screens that it looked like when you hit all the keys. And so I'd start the program so that the guy would come and hit all the keys to wipe the memory, and then it looked like it wiped the memory, and then I'd go back. And I wouldn't cheat, I just didn't want to lose my Lemmings game. And so that's one of the first things that I really spent a lot of time in programming wise, was just to keep my Monopoly game.
I respect that.
That's kind of how I got into programming, I suppose, but and probably one of the most useful things I've written, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yourself.
Given your track record, I believe that.
Yeah, funny enough, a very similar story. A couple of years later, we had TI-200, the Voyage calculator. So you had a larger display and you could do similar things. Same problem, like teachers deleting the memory, so they don't want you to cheat. But I tried to kind of code something like Space Wars. Just some kind of different graphics, but that was the first time. And I would say something more modern was my parents owned a restaurant for quite a long time, so they needed a website. So I did something with front page, and then I did it plain HTML, CSS back then. We don't talk now if it's a programming language or not, but.
So I do have one other story.
Sure.
That maybe relates to other stuff. But my first job out of high school was a database company, or they had database because they did trade show registration, and so everybody that would go to CES or something, they would all register through this company. And I was my first job out of high school was. These companies would call and they would say okay, we want everybody with these demographics and we want a list and labels sort of system. And our job was to go through and go through the whole database of the trade show registrations and find the thing and mark everybody that matched it and compile it down and put it on a tape or a CD or not a CD, a floppy disk, and mail it out. It was very slow. It took forever. And there were 4 of us that worked in this department. And I read the book. We were using FoxPro, and I read the book on FoxPro, and it turns out that there was a SQL language behind it. And I learned how I wrote my own program to automate my job because I was bored with my job. And I was like, this should be easier to do this. And I wrote a program that put all 4 of us out of business because the person could answer the phone, take the order, do the thing, print out the CD, and then ship it off. And it never actually had to go to our department.
Wow.
So I put our entire department out of business. So that was my first job. was the first thing that I did.
You got yourself fired from your first job.
I got myself promoted.
Oh.
But I mean, this is the thing with, we'll probably talk about AI or whatever. Like, this is a constant theme in software, right? Is something comes along and it does your job better than you do your job, which is kind of the point of software, I feel like. And I think a lot of people are scared about it or feel bad about it or something. And this is the very first thing that I did, was put myself out of a job. But there's always another job that comes, right? Like, there's always something else interesting for you to do, right? If it's menial, or if it's something that can be automated, and then you automate it, then it's like, oh, that opens up more room to do more interesting things. And so I think about that a lot, especially with the ChatGPT or the new AI stuff, of people being scared about this can write programs or this can write functions or whatever. Like, yes, it can, and yes, it will, and yes, like, your job will change, but like, there'll be more jobs. There'll be more. There's always more things to do. Everything sucks, right? Like, there's always something to write. There's always something to make better. And I think, making something more efficient it never stops somebody from being able to produce something, right? Like, it only helps be able to produce more.
Did you know that you were automating yourself out of that position when you did that?
No, I think, like almost everything that I've ever done, I think actually most good programmers are fundamentally very lazy. And so if you do something, I tried actually for the first time in my life, after my last job and before the startup that I'm starting now, I had a couple months that I wasn't working. I've always had a job since I was in high school. And I had a couple months and I was doing some woodworking, and I realized this isn't something that I love doing, because you do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I made 3 tables and I was like, you know what? I think I'm done making tables. Like, I've made tables now. Like, I can't make tables much better than that. I can make a little bit maybe, right? But like with software, when you're fundamentally a highly lazy person like I am, then software is great, because the whole thing is that then you can automate it, and then you don't have to do that thing anymore, and you can move on to the next most interesting thing. And so that was, from day one of my first job out of high school, I think I learned that I am very fundamentally lazy, and software is the greatest path because it allows me to use that in a interesting way.
So you both found coding when you were relatively young. And I'm wondering, at what point did you consider yourself a developer? Because that's different, right? Saying I tinker, I dabble, I do a little bit of this, make some lemming games is different from I am now identifying as a developer. So when was that moment for you?
Wow, that's a tough question. I never thought about like that. It just happened. I mean, I would say very simple answer could be like when you first made money with, doing programming stuff and so on, or actually in school. I mean, originally, like the thing, I always wanted to do games and websites and these kind of multimedia things, and I signed up for technical informatics in Austria, like as a middle school, or I think it's called middle school. And I didn't know what technical informatics is. It's like called informatics. So I thought I'm going to go there and like do websites and games and all of these crazy things. And then like after 1 week, I learned that technical informatics is actually like programming microcontrollers and assembly and electrical engineering and all of these things, and doing kind of, building machines and programming machines. So I finished that school. I just waited 5 years, and then I went to web projects and so on. But maybe at that time, I formed like kind of this identity as a developer.
What about you, Scott?
So I never really wanted to be a software developer. I think I did software development so actually that first job that I had, it was because I needed to get a job out of high school. And so I went to like an employment agency, like in Ventura, in this little town that I lived in California. I was like, I need a job. And they were like, you're probably going to be like moving furniture for old ladies, that need some help around the house or whatever. And I was like, sounds good. Sign me up, whatever. Like I'll serve food. I'll do whatever. And they had me do data entry at this company, and then I ended up at this job because I just found more and more interesting tasks sort of while I was there. But even through college, I was in cognitive science, I was in linguistics. That was kind of, those are things that were really interesting. How does the human mind work? How does the brain work? How does language work? Like, I got into ASL linguistics. I really wanted to, when I graduated, I wanted to go to a master's degree or PhD and get a PhD in linguistics. That was kind of what I wanted to do. But my job, the thing that fed me for the last 6 years was I could program computers, and I found it fun and I found it interesting. And then I got a job where they were like, we'll pay you a bunch of money to do the thing you enjoy, right? And that you're good at, as opposed to a job, struggling to get a PhD that you'll probably struggle to find a job for after that. And I was like, maybe I'll just do this then. So it wasn't like I really want to be a software developer or really want to be a startup creator or something like that. It was always more accidental of just, this is easy and I like it and it pays well. And so I might as well embrace it, I suppose.
Take me back to the early years of being a software developer and what the ecosystem looked like at that point. Because when I think about developing now, I mean, it's amazing. I don't know about you all, but I have acclimated to ChatGPT so quickly. I cannot imagine building anything without just having my little, AI friend just kind of code along with me. And just the amount of support and resources that we have available to us as developers today is just so much. What was it like when you all were starting your careers? What did the ecosystem look like?
Yeah, so the problem with me is that I'm very, very, very old. So I started with early Linux stuff, right? Like that was actually when I started my first job. It was like Red Hat 5 or whatever. Like it was like an early Red Hat stuff, Yellow Dog, like these old Linux systems. And I had to compile my own kernels, and like USB support would come out, and I'd have to like experimentally compile it and see if it run and see if it worked on my laptop, and I'd have to do refresh rates on X11 and like all this dumb bullshit, right? And I tell these stories to people who have no idea what any of those words mean anymore, and I feel very, very old, but like it was very fun. Like it was this fun hackery type thing of just being like, can I get this to work? And you get it to work, and it's so fun, like it's so fascinating, and I loved that idea. It was almost like my dad was into cars, right, and would build cars, and I always hated cars because it's expensive. Like you mess it up, and like you have to buy another part or whatever. But like computers, you can keep messing around with it, and you can keep trying things out, and you can tinker, and you can play, and you can get things to work, and it has this thrill of creation and experimentation and fun, and work with this open source sort of community that now it's different. Now there's GitHub, now it's corporate, now there's millions and millions of open source developers. At the time, it was very kind of more fringe, grunge type, I'm going to compile my own thing and get my stupid USB driver to work because Linus wrote it last weekend or whatever, right? And like, I can get this thing to work. And now it's much more, it's so interesting. Like, I think the sort of, one of the main things of the question is, how has the community changed? And the community changed because there was more this hobbyist open source thing where you would play and you would have fun and you'd learn. And then there was this corporate thing that was Sun, racking expensive Sun servers and getting shit to work. And now it's all the same, right? Like now important companies use Linux. Like nobody would rack some proprietary Sun Microsystems, server or whatever that costs lots of money. They do off the shelf open source Linux stuff to run massive companies, right? Like, and so the combination of those worlds has been very interesting for me to watch, and it's been fun being a part of that as part of GitHub to be a part of helping that happen, I think. But when I started, that was very different. I felt like I was clubbing in Berlin or something. Like it was cool, and you were sort of on the fringe, and it was fun, and like the corporates that would look down on you or whatever. Like that was open source at the time, and now it's kind of all the same world in a way that I think is great for everybody, but maybe a little bit less fun or cool.
Okay. So what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I started my career around 2006, 7, something like that. Or no, 2007, 8. And I would say it was an easier life as a developer back then because you didn't have so many opportunities, which actually is a good thing. But I mean, if you remember back that time, like if you wanted to do mobile apps, you just, Objective-C for iOS, Java for Android. If you wanted to do web applications, you kind of, had PHP, and then jQuery was the big thing, and then Ajax came out, and it was like super exciting. And nowadays, so it was kind of somehow predefined, like what tech stacks you use, and if you wanted to do something more complex, more complicated, then you had to program things yourself, like converters for audio files, more multimedia files, and then kind of it was a bit even more exciting. And like if I compare that to nowadays, it's like you have so many opportunities, and actually when you start a new project or something, you lose so much time about like thinking like what tech stack to use, what architecture to use. There's so many opportunities. I mean, alone in the, let's say, front-end world, like there is thousands of possible frameworks, libraries, whatever you want to use. And I think that it just kind of makes it a bit harder for developers to get some pace in the projects, because they try to find the best solution and the best tech stack and all of these things, whereas maybe don't need to think too much about these things.
Do you feel like it's gotten more complicated these days?
I think people make it complicated because there's like many solutions for a problem, and it's about solving the problem. It's not about having the best looking kind of solution.
So with that in mind, when you are creating a new project, building a new app, what are the different things that you consider when it comes to figuring out what your tech stack should be?
I mean, honestly, like I don't do projects anymore. So we like transitioned from doing projects to WeAreDevelopers and doing these events and building the community. But back then, I mean, I'm a very, very pragmatic person. So for me, it was like, hey, what kind of resources you have? What is their skill set? What works for the client? What serves the purpose, and so on. And I mean, you always had some deadlines, especially if you do kind of projects for other companies, like in a digital agency or so. So you don't get too much time to lose on these kind of questions, which is definitely different if you build your own startup, because you define your own deadlines. Probably the runway defines your deadlines as well, but you always find some reason to take discussions further on tech decisions.
What about you, Scott? When you think about building things today, and you think about that ecosystem, the resources, how do you kind of figure out what to put together?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I feel like it's massively complicated because there's a million great ways of like, especially like I've been doing a lot of stuff in Tori now, which is like a Rust backend, and we use Svelte as the JavaScript front end, and before that it'd be Electron, and before that it'd be, I mean, he was talking about mobile apps. Like when I started developing, there was no such thing as mobile apps because I had a Nokia, right? Like you can't program for it. But like there's all of these frameworks and systems that make this very easy, but there's a million of them and they're all good, right? Like in just in different ways. And so actually what I find most valuable is conferences like this, like people that you meet that do interesting things, that are very smart, that know, that have experience. And then like I just ask my network, like, hey, I want to do this thing. What do you guys like? Just I ask my my Twitter network or my LinkedIn network or whatever, or just talking to people at conferences of, if I wanted to do this, how would you do that, right? And I know enough good, smart, professional people that you meet at conferences like this that can say, yeah, I tried this and this and this, right? Like everybody only has so much time that they can spend on doing something, but like all of that time invested in this is what I like about this and this is what's difficult or what's good or whatever. But like end of the day, I feel like I'm much less. I feel like people get real. This is the way, right? This is the tool. And I'm like, I can build it in Flask. I don't know. I'd prefer Ruby on Rails or whatever, but like, I'm sure I can also get it done. Like what's interesting is the end of the day, how people use the website or how it functions or whatever. And like, I'm writing a bunch in Rust right now, right? And it's not, I'd rather do it in Ruby. Like I could do it twice as fast, but like I can get it done in order to get the job done. Programming languages, I feel like, or frameworks or whatever, don't matter so much as everybody's on the same page and you know what the product is supposed to be and can this thing deliver the actually a lot of people I think made fun of Ruby on Rails as like not being scalable, like 10 years ago, whatever, it's not being scalable or not being whatever, but like all of these GitHub and Shopify and all of these huge, like you can make it work, right? Like it's more, what does the product do and does that solve people's problems and is it interesting? It's not, I feel like it doesn't really matter what you choose. It mostly matters that you know what you want to build, and you can make your tool do that until it gets to scale, and then you have scaling problems, and no matter what tool you use, nothing doesn't have problems there, right? Like it always gets interesting when you get to a larger size. So yeah, I suppose I care less. It's more about what makes you happy, right? Or what makes your team happy, or what is interesting. Just choose one and get into it, and read a book, and it's fine.
Because at the end of the day, the users don't know or care what you've built.
The users should not give a shit what you're using, right? They shouldn't even know, right? Like what the backend is. It should feel snappy, or if that's important, or it should, it should do what like we've been talking. Actually, I've been talking a bunch about Mercury, because we use Mercury as like this corporate banking thing, and it's surprising and delightful all the time about how good they solve the problems of corporate banking, right? And it's like, this is such a weird thing. And it's like, I have no idea what this is written in, and I don't care, right? All I care is that there's somebody who cares that this is the problem that I'm gonna have, and that this is the most interesting way of solving it, or the simplest way of solving it, or the most delightful way of solving it, and they solved it that way. And I don't care if they can use jQuery. Like I actually love jQuery. I would still be using it if every JavaScript developer was like, please don't do that anymore. But it doesn't matter, right? Like it solves the problem. That's what's important, not the technology.
What was it like to evangelize Git back in the day? Because I'm curious, because the job of developer communities, and especially this DX industry that has really risen over the years, is to get people to adopt new technology, right? And you did that, and you've written books on it, you've done that for many years. What was it like to bring people into the world of Git back in the day?
It was very fun. I love showing people a way that they didn't know it could be, right? So if it's something that they're doing that is painful every day, and you're like, because I would just do demos, like in the very early days when people weren't using it, everybody was using Subversion or CVS or something, and I would be like, check it out, I have a branch, I have another branch, I merge them, now I have both those things, and like people are like, oh my god, like, do you know? Because everybody can feel that pain. They're like, I understand how hard that would be given the tools that I have right now, and so. Like I think a lot of what's interesting about introducing a new technology is figuring out what is a path that people have in their lives every day that is painful or that is difficult. And if you have a tool that makes that better and makes that frictionless, and you can show that, right, and you can demonstrate that it was a very easy sell, I think, to get people to use Git. Because of branching, really, right? Like it was just so much easier than how people were trying to solve problems, and everybody could identify their personal daily problems and be like, "Yep, it would be way easier with that than the way that I'm doing it right now," right? Like it didn't really have to be this checkbox thing of like, here's what the competitors have and here's what we have. It's just like, here's a very simple thing that would be hard to do with the tools you have, and I can show you how easy it is to do with that. And I love that this is actually. I love demonstrating problems and solutions that way. Like DHH had, to go back to Rails, had this very famous sort of 15-minute video of just writing this blog or whatever that he did. And it wasn't, here's all of the little features in Rails that you're gonna like. It was, watch me write a thing that would take you an hour, and I can do it in 15 minutes in a way that is very beautiful, right? And you're like, okay, I'm sold. Like I'll invest time into this. And so evangelizing, like if that's what you're doing, if you're doing, developer tools or whatever, and trying to get people to use your product, I think what the best way of doing that is, here's something that would be hard, and you can imagine it being hard, and you've maybe tried to do something like this, and I'll show you how to do it in 1/10 of the time, or in a way that it's much, much nicer, right, as an experience. And so, yeah, for me, selling Git, it was always, I think, very easy, because it was demonstrably much easier than the tools that people were using at the time.
It really helps when you're solving a real problem, a real pain point.
It's very clear, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Writing a book is a huge pain in the ass. Never do that.
Okay.
Although I did, on the other side, sorry, this isn't really super related, but I did write this book, and then we're working with some AI stuff now, and we trained this model on my book content, and so we have like a Git bot that just is trained on the Pro Git book, and so I can ask the bot questions, and then Virtual Scott will, because I wrote all this content, will come out and then answer my Git question from
That's
my own
amazing.
content. And I'm like, thank you, Virtual Scott. That's
So you're literally
it's
talking
weird.
to yourself.
I have a bot. There's a Scott bot.
Yeah, there's a Scott bot. Do we get access to the Scott bot? Or
If you want access to the Scott bot, just send me an email. I'll send you access to the Scott bot. Any Git questions. It's not good at anything else, but it's good at Git.
It's good at Git. That's what we need. I'm curious, how have developer communities changed over the years? You've been doing this for quite some time, managing developers and overseeing them, growing their careers, helping them navigate the industry. How has it evolved over time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say developers as personalities and as characters have kind of grown and evolved. Like, I mean, for, let's say, the outside world, we are kind of considered introverts and these kind of things, And I mean, for us, for example, a reason for doing WeAreDevelopers was back in the days when you went to developer conferences, you actually, went into a Congress hotel or something. You were locked into a room like with 10 hours of content, great conferences. And actually, then you had pizza and that was it. And then at the same time, when you go to business conferences, startup conferences, marketing conferences, where the content, I would say, was much more like only touching the surface, but the people were celebrating themselves and what they do, and they were celebrating, their industry, their roles, they were networking and so on. And for us, it was like, hey, when we talk like in let's say, a safe space for us developers, we are very much not introverts. Like, we are very open-minded, we are very open to share anything from our lives and so on. And we wanted to bring that kind of to the surface. So we said, okay, let's do an event for developers, and let's not do it like for only kind of one technical topic. So I always say, like, if you want to learn get deep insights on Java, then go to JAX. If you want to learn something about Angular, then go to NG Vikings or NG whatever conference, and so on and so on. Because if we are developers, it's more like, hey, you do have 350 sessions, you dive into some topics, learn something new, but it's actually about bringing all of these silos of different roles and different technologies together, and just having a large amount of people networking and celebrating themselves. So it was about giving developers a voice, because I mean, one of our taglines was, for example, like, developers are shaping the future of society and of business. And if you look at today's world, like, I mean, there is nothing that would work as developers, and all of these marketing people and sales people and business professionals and so on, they actually like kind of wouldn't exist in that way anymore if there wouldn't be developers. So what we wanted to do is to just show them how important they are, how important we as developers are for, and also kind of show the responsibility that we have with the software and products that we do. And I think in the past couple of years, even it started before the pandemic already, I think that developers kind of got some motivation to go out, be themselves, speak out loudly, involve themselves in actually, like, society topics, political topics, and these kind of things. And that's quite interesting, because it also has an impact, of course, of how businesses work and how they do, how they build products, and so on. So I would say it's a very exciting time to be a developer and to build developer communities right now.
And that was going to be my next question about what is it like to be a developer today and in the future. You touched on this, Scott, this idea of AI and what role that plays in our careers. And I've heard from people who are not in tech yet, but are thinking about getting into it. They're nervous about AI taking over developer jobs, and there not being kind of a future for them, and they're speaking kind of from the outside. And so I'm wondering, when you think about the way our industry is, might evolve over the next 5-10 years, how do you see AI and software developers living together? Do you see a replacement coming? Are we going to get even better developers? How is that going to work, do you think?
like I would really embrace it. It's like, I mean, every one of us knows that AI is a tool that we can use to kind of become better developers, or however you would call our role in the future. I get that question asked quite often recently, because with the release of ChatGPT and making it available to a broader public, like media jumped on the train, and now they are kind of yelling around that everyone is going to lose their jobs, and even the developers are going to lose their jobs, and so on. And I'm like, hey, but I mean, we are missing developers all over the world. Like every country, every market kind of has a lack of tech workforce. So first of all, if it helps to reduce that would be awesome. But I would say that even it will create more jobs. It's just a different role. Like we will transition into different roles. And it will help us to kind of focus on the important things, because what does it actually mean to be a developer? I mean, is it really kind of to write the same piece of code for the 100th time? Or is it more about like identifying what is the actual problem, what the market needs, and build something? And I think that maybe developers in 10 years will be kind of builders, and or in 15 years or whenever. And maybe the process of developing something will be more like connecting different tools, different worlds, asking the right questions, writing the right prompts, and then connecting it to one system. So like in a Minority Report style. But yeah, so and as you said, like there will be new challenges, new problems, new opportunities. I don't think that AI will lead to kind of developers losing their jobs, like not at all.
Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI is very interesting in that it's a new type of technology, in that it doesn't provide sort of heuristic answers to things, right? Like in the way that most other technologies in the past have. Like what's good about it is that it's non-deterministic. That what's interesting about it is that it's non-deterministic in a human way, and I think we're kind of unprepared for what that can mean for increasing productivity or efficiency or something, because there's lots of things that I do as a software developer that I think they need to have taste, right? They need to have a human element. There's things that are very technical that's like, I need to solve this very specific technical heuristic algorithm problem, and ChatGPT can be relatively good at coming up with something that does that, and that saves me time, and that's great. But there's also, if you step back from that, an amount of taste of like going back to the thing, what does the product do? It's not about what the technology does, it's what does the product do? And I think people have to have taste in what does the product do. And we can have everybody in this room, we can have everybody at this conference, there are, however many software developers we have, and we can say, solve this problem, and there'll be 200 developers, and will be 200 different ways that they solved it, right? Programmers are non-deterministic, right? Like programmers they all have the same problem set and the same output that they want to do, but they all hit it in a different way, and they all approach it a different way, and they all have slightly different outputs, even though technically the problem set is exactly the same. And technology has never really been able to do that well before, and ChatGPT or sort of large language models kind of give us the first tool sets to help us do this in an interesting way, right? Where it's like, I don't really care exactly what you come up with. I just care that you come up with something similar to that, right? But it is also massively parallelizable in a way that you can't do with human beings generally, right? Like if I want you to come up with 500 solutions to this problem, then it's going to take you 500 times more time. If I want AI to come up with that, it's going to take the same amount of time, because I can have it do it 500 at a time. And so, long answer to a relatively short question, but I think actually what software development looks like is more us describing problems and having taste about what the output is, and having these systems non-deterministically say, here's 500 ways of solving this problem, and I just need to make sure that they're all different, and then I test all of them, and then I give you the ones that I think are probably the best winners here, right? And then I can just iterate on that. And I really feel like that's a way that we can solve problems and create code. I really honestly don't think about OpenAI or AI coding stuff that much differently than a lot of no-code solutions, right? Where it's like it's kind of constraining the problem set, and you're not actually writing the code. You're just saying, I know what I want the output to be, and I know generally what I want this to look like, and I don't really give a shit how it's implemented. Like it's not interesting to me what the actual functions are that are running, the actual code that's running, what it compiles to, right? And we do this with high-level languages too, right? Like we write stuff in Ruby, and it's like I don't care what the machine code looks like. Like I know what I kind of want it to do, and it just makes it a higher level order problem. And I think that what we'll see is that there's less of a difference in am I doing something on Wix or am I writing it in Gatsby and putting it on Vercel or whatever, right? Like they're really in the end kind of the same, right? In the end, when you use the product, you don't know what's behind it or what's exactly doing it. But as an implementer, what you care about is what is the problem set. And if AI can generate code that does that thing, then that's great, right? Like you just have to have some taste or some verifiability of being like, this works or doesn't work, or does what I wanted to do or doesn't want to do what I wanted to do. And the more technical you are, the better you can maybe make those decisions. But I think in the end, it doesn't really matter how the code is produced, right? Like it's about what does the product do. And AI, I think, will give us some fantastic tools to do really, really interesting things in a higher level way, right? That we don't have to worry about the details all the time, right?
Absolutely. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Thank you so much, Sead. Really appreciate it. Round of applause for them, please. Thank you.
Thank you.